My partner and I moved to the San Luis Valley to raise cattle. Did not move here for UFOs, you know, and didn't even realize that this was a hot spot of the nation for sightings, and I knew nothing about them anyway. Well, then I started meeting some of the locals down here, and they all had UFO stories. I mean, one after another, even to the point where there was a real estate company years ago that would make people who bought land from them sign a disclaimer saying that they were aware that there was UFO activity in this valley. See?
The weight of the evidence has become heavy for certain things, such as visitation from other intelligences. Unidentified aerial phenomena, and that's to separate even more from the reality that there are disks, there are hard physical craft that are traveling in our airspace with impunity. Right. And this is something that's been going on since the beginning of recorded human history, but the military got really interested in this, obviously, in the early 40s. But I don't definitively know, as you said the word aliens, that these are aliens. What is alien? Alien is anything we don't understand yet. This may be a natural phenomenon, and what we're experiencing are kind of repercussions of that. We don't exactly know.
Right, so that's sort of like when they say an unidentified flying object.
It is unidentified.
That doesn't mean it's from another world, it just means it's unidentified.
So the military calls them UAPs.
What do you think the government's angle is here?
They have earned our distrust.
Yeah.
Especially on this issue. You know, we know the FBI, we know the CIA have been studying this, we know the Navy, the Army, the Air Force has been studying this. We have documents, yet they throw the smoke and mirrors, nothing to see here, move on. They have earned our distrust on this topic.
To maybe our favorite story of the day, the one that we mentioned at the top of the show. Cue the music. What looks to be a case of real-life X-Files, ladies and gentlemen.
We're learning this morning about a Pentagon program that spent millions of dollars to look into UFO sightings, and ESPN's Tony Reale is so excited he's fidgeting in his seat.
Yeah, you bring in the sports guy for this. You know, I'm all over this story. I told you, not just the X-Files, the XYZ files. That's what you get with me. They're unidentified, they're flying, and they're objects. And the fact that a secret department in the Pentagon thought they were worth millions of dollars of investigation has many wondering if the truth is out there.
Dun, dun, dun.
My gosh.
An unidentified flying object.
Look at that thing, dude.
Spotted by 2 Navy fighter pilots flying high above the clouds.
Look at that thing. It's rotating.
These newly released videos from the Department of Defense, published by the New York Times and Washington Post, part of a once secret government program to investigate sightings of so-called anomalous aerial vehicles in the skies. The Department of Defense has spent at least $22 million since 2007 looking into UFO sightings.
There are definitely unidentified flying objects. Whether there are aliens inside them, I
Quite
don't know.
astute, thank you. Paula?
I believe that there are other beings, but I'm not sure that I believe in aliens.
What's up, everybody? The Morgal here. Over the last few years, we've all collectively spent a great deal of time and energy debunking the globe Earth theory by destroying all of the so-called evidences for a spinning ball Earth, and providing, of course, standalone evidence to prove that the world is a plane, which is completely at rest, as opposed to a spinning ball. So I'll certainly continue to dedicate myself to promoting this truth and voicing arguments against the globe Earth theory. But for this video, I wanted to change it up a little bit and not focus so much on proving flat Earth or debunking the globe, as much as going with the assumption that the Earth is indeed, well, quite obviously, a static plane, and allow our imagination to take us beyond the known realms, if only hypothetically. For the majority of our lives, the limit to our imagination was carved out by the hypothetical spherical Earth, and of course the theory of infinite space separating ourselves to the nearest star by over 4 hypothetical light years, or over 25 trillion miles to the nearest star, according to Lions. According to this mainstream narrative, while the universe may be teeming with life in theory, it is logistically impossible for human beings to travel to some other hypothetical solar system due to the sheer distance involved. And of course, we would have no firm understanding of the potential destinations and their inhabitability and that sort of thing. So, for all intents and purposes, according to the mainstream scientific philosophy, which deifies theorem and mathematics and does not allow for interstellar travel, practically speaking, ergo the Earth is an inescapable place which we shouldn't even bother exploring beyond the known realms, even in our imaginations, according to the globe Earth theory. And, you know, growing up on planet Earth, I always found myself fascinated with UFOs and the concept of aliens, and I've always felt that human beings are probably not alone, or probably not the only intelligent life to be found in the universe. Now, in the globe Earth infinite space paradigm, while the concept of aliens or UFOs from another solar system is certainly intriguing, as it is plausible due to the vast, infinite nature of the cosmos, the fact that UFOs are, allegedly being observed by people the world over, while more claim to be abducted and experimented upon by these creatures piloting the UFOs, these sort of claims and concepts do not lend themselves to the idea that the UFOs are coming from some other world in space. And this is, of course, due to the vast distances involved with hypothetical interstellar travel, which really never sat well with me as a globe Earth believer throughout my years. Indeed, the fact that the common conception of aliens involves little green or gray humanoid creatures who walk around on two legs with two arms, two legs, two eyes, and an overall human-like appearance certainly couldn't have been coming from very far off in theory. The mainstream viewpoint on this matter is that if life were indeed forming on other hypothetical planets in the cosmos, it would most likely be in a form completely, well, alien to what we commonly see in living organisms here in reality. Frankly, we see a major diversity of life here on the physical plane of reality already, even just in nature, you know, everything from centipedes to birds and everything in between. So humoring the infinite space theory forces us to admit that hypothetical aliens from other worlds would be anything but bipedal humanoids, right? It doesn't make any sense. So with that being said, I'm certainly not claiming that UFOs are inhabited by humanoid creatures who are abducting people. Of course, there are dozens of religions built around the premise of UFOs and extraterrestrials, not to mention all of the propaganda, which results in a culture laden with infinite space brand nihilism. And that is, of course, to speak of science fiction, which mingles with hypothetical physics, all in support of this notion that planet Earth is indeed just another so-called planet, inferring by default that life here on Earth is really nothing special after all, according to this narrative. Our society has a subconscious mind which was formed by what we've seen on television to a very startling extent during what can only be described as our formative years for sure, but then also later in life as a semi-lucid hypnotic state crafted by people that we've never heard of. Now, these people behind this hypnotic suggestions and advertisements brought to you through the television and such, these people have an agenda or a narrative which they specifically crafted to dumb us down and keep us in line. And this narrative certainly involves the spinning ball Earth as the central hub for all other deceptions. However, those who are still responsible for perpetuating the deception don't even necessarily know that it's a deception. That's the best thing about it. For lack of a better term, it is why the deception has been so successful. The other part of that I would suggest is because even if you tell somebody the truth, they don't believe you. Even if you prove to somebody that the Earth is a stationary plane, they don't believe you. So this deception does perpetuate itself nicely because, again, the people responsible for perpetuating it, i.e. the teachers and the scientists and most of those people who work at NASA, they're perpetuating this deception, and yet they don't know that it's even a deception at all. And again, the second part would be that people don't believe you anyway. So isn't that kind of perfect, right? If you can convince a person as a child that the world is a spinning ball in outer space, then you can indeed convince that person of pretty much anything, like Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny, right? But at least the children are told at some point that those are not real, unlike with the ball mythology. So while this particular video should not be mistaken as an endorsement for the notion of humanoid creatures flying around in UFOs abducting people, that is not to say, however, that UFOs do not exist. In fact, I've personally seen something a few years ago, not too long ago, flying through the sky at a very seemingly high velocity, making no sound at all. And it was absolutely, definitely not a plane of any sort. And to this day, I cannot attest to exactly what I and another person saw that day. So it certainly was a UFO that I saw. It was an unidentified flying object. And, you know, does that mean I believe it was piloted by little green men? Honestly, probably not. I don't think that at all. But that isn't to say that such a thing is completely impossible. Many people have come to the realization of the flat, fixed, and immovable Earth and automatically dismiss the notion of extraterrestrials, which, in my opinion, is not necessarily prudent. Of course, the theory of an infinite vacuum called space becomes a complete impossibility under the lens of the flat and motionless Earth. The concept of other worlds or other realms, however, do indeed become tantalizingly plausible on the flat Earth. The notion that once we travel far enough south, we either run into a wall of a dome or fall off of some type of an edge are equally implausible, I believe, and are certainly not supported by any evidence that I'm aware of. There is all sorts of circumstantial evidence for a physical glass dome in the sky, but certainly nothing which concretely proves the notion of such a physical dome which meets the Earth at some point as a base. I just haven't seen any tangible evidence for that, in my opinion. Considering the Earth to certainly be a stationary plane, we find natural layers of matter which inherently find their place of rest according to their density. So, for example, a beach ball filled with air held underwater, to say a dozen foot underwater, will race up to the surface immediately upon being released, and it will find its place of rest upon the surface of the water. Similarly, a ball of a similar size, made of solid steel, would of course instantly sink to the bottom of the water, but that same portion of steel, molded into the correct shape, will float upon the surface of the water. Furthermore, a balloon filled with helium will, similarly to the beach ball held underwater, a helium balloon will race at great speeds up towards the sky to find its natural place of rest, according to its density. So, what I picture high above the surface of the Earth is an area where the atmosphere plane, which is rich in water vapor and oxygen and nitrogen, like we are accustomed to here on the low altitudes, that layer abruptly ends. Not quite as abruptly as the water in a lake, not that abruptly, like a well-defined surface, but a similar principle is at work, where you have the lower density layer of gases resting upon the lower high density layer of gases and sort of floating on top there. And that explains nicely why helium balloons will race up to extreme altitudes without any form of acceleration necessary. They just naturally know where they belong, right? Helium knows where it belongs according to its density, and I think that that's an amazing fact of nature that we sort of take for granted, but it does attest to the power of the breath of God, if you will, or the power of the natural electromagnetic field generated by the Earth itself. So at some point in altitude above this layer, it stands to reason that all of the lighter gases are essentially conglomerating at some point above the altitudes that we can reach with sort of amateur equipment. It's claimed that we would need some type of physical structure to separate the world's atmosphere from the vacuum of space, which is true indeed, hypothetically. However, if infinite space doesn't actually exist, then we're not necessarily constricted to a physical dome structure which has, physical, tangible foundations somewhere south of Antarctica. We know that the Earth behaves as a massive electromagnetic device, like a capacitor plate, and I believe that the sun and the moon and celestial objects are somehow related to this electromagnetic property of the Earth. Either the sun and moon are somehow causal of the Earth's dielectric functionality, or they are a symptom or a consequence of this electromagnetic properties of the Earth, or perhaps something created deep in the bowels of the Earth itself. in terms of this rotating magnetic vortex or torus toroidal in shape rotating field. Now, I find it completely plausible for the Earth's natural rotational electromagnetic vortex field could be sufficient to create a barrier more or less containing the highest levels of the atmosphere plane, preventing a loss of atmosphere which would otherwise find its way outside the known Earth solar system. So while I wouldn't go so far as to claim that the Earth revolves around the sun, of course, it's safe to say that life on Earth is inherently tied to the sun and moon cycle. Without day and night cycles, plants and animals couldn't survive as far as we can tell. And so we'll call the area upon the possibly infinite plane, which is in close enough proximity to the life-giving energy and light of the sun. So when we study accounts of people who have claimed to have traveled south of the so-called Antarctic, we find intriguing hints of unknown lands within our ability to explore today. So, for example, United States Admiral Richard Byrd alleged that there were indeed large land masses south of the South Pole, one of which being south of Little America, larger than the continental United States. And again, this would be south of the South Pole, which doesn't really fit very well on a globe. In the early 1900s, an account of a South Polar voyage called the Iron Republic spoke of an entire civilization which was an offshoot of the colonization of America. In this account, the Iron Republic, and I did an audiobook rendering or read this aloud and put it on a video here. I'll put a card right here. But in the Iron Republic, it's alleged that the European humans who founded the Iron Republic had technology well in advance of what was around in the early 1900s, late 1800s, when this account was supposedly taking place. And it was published right at the turn of the 1900s century. So, for example, individuals in this story had the ability to fly through the air as easily as swimming. They had the equivalent of television screens and radios which aired live performances miles away in the comfort of home, and what seemed to be like mag-lift trains which traveled hundreds of miles per hour long before such things were invented or even theorized. And so in this light, if we humor the assumption that what we define as Earth in terms of a handful of continents and oceans are just the area known to us, and there are potentially inhabitable lands in all directions, potentially. This is going out on a bit of a limb here, but if it's possible for us to have a solar/electromagnetic vortex system to aid in the flourishing and nourishment of life, then I don't think it's out of the question to assume that there could be other similar naturally occurring electromagnetic vortex solar systems. In this regard, the prospect of intelligent life manifesting itself extraterrestrially becomes a real possibility, but not a hypothetical possibility some dozens of trillions of miles away at the very nearest, but potentially right in our own backyard, so to speak. Furthermore, the notion of such extraterrestrials being humanoid becomes plausible as well. I think the biggest point that I want to make here is that while I personally don't believe that there are extraterrestrial humanoids flying around in UFOs abducting people, I will say that the possibility is in fact plausible on the stationary planar Earth reality, whereas in the infinite space hypothesis, such things are a theoretical impossibility, at least such hypothetical alien civilizations traveling all the way here from some distant hypothetical star. Right. So it stands to reason that if the governments of the world have made it a uniform policy to vehemently deny the existence of UFOs, have a very clear motive to do as such, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if the aliens are traveling from some other solar system, in air quotes, then they have technology which far surpasses anything that we could even imagine. Now, on the other hand, if they're merely coming from some other hydroelectric thermal area upon the physical plane with their own little solar system and magnetic system, then they're using nuts and bolts technology, which is apparently amazing if you believe some of the UFO videos out there. But they certainly aren't interstellar or extra dimensional or supernatural. They're just nuts and bolts technology. So again, I'm not trying to express any beliefs here or like sway anyone to agree with me. I just think it's unwise to dismiss or even shun UFO or extraterrestrial enthusiasts from the flat Earth discussion. Now, it is often assumed by flat earthers that flat Earth is incompatible with the UFO phenomenon, or at least the ET portions of it. However, I disagree with that notion. I think that the flat Earth reality could absolutely support the notion of humanoid creatures, technically from another world, so extraterrestrials, flying around in UFOs, abducting people, at least in theory. And, the flat Earth does a far cry better job of doing so, explaining this in theory, than the globe Earth theory does, to be honest. And again, this isn't to say that I agree with the theory, of course, but it's important to me that we do not reject UFO enthusiasts or ET enthusiasts offhand because we feel that such things are impossible on the flat and motionless Earth, because I disagree. Part of me feels that the governments of the world, and the US certainly notwithstanding, are conducting tests on Black Project equipment, which would rightly be mistaken as a UFO, unidentified flying object, right? I also believe it's possible that the same governments could be performing psychological operations on the public in order to spark conversations about extraterrestrial crafts in our skies. But finally, I also think it's possible that there is a very real element to some portion of UFOs which could be, for all intents and purposes, extraterrestrial, not from this known world, if you will. So what if there are advanced civilizations living beyond the known borders of our world? Is it possible that they could develop technology which is superior to our own? How would the governments of the world respond to such a thing? Would they tell us anything at all? If they did tell us anything, would it be the truth or even close to it? Personally, I think they'd hide it for as long as they possibly could, and they would also push out misinformation in order to make the whole topic seem too complex and far out and obscure for anyone to get any real answers. They simply couldn't come out and tell us the truth about this if it were going on, as it would destroy the entire Ball Earth Great Deception, I believe, if they told us the whole truth. And so they would hide it from us, absolutely would. And they would also set up boundaries in the Antarctic, which make it impossible for, us sovereign personal entities to even consider exploring beyond, let alone, making any real efforts to bring back tangible proof, right? So, obviously, I've long been fascinated with the phenomenon of UFOs and crop circles, which crop circles have, of course, been debunked by the mainstream government mouthpiece media. But in fact, many crop circles do appear to be faked. But a few of them, some percentage of them, really appear to be genuine and frankly defy logical scientific explanation. What if crop circles are our geological cousins' attempt at communicating with us? What if we actually have cousins of sorts being kept at bay by the governments of the world at some point south of Antarctica, right? I think most normal people would agree that we should try to communicate with them and learn from them and live in harmony with them if such things do exist. But, of course, the governments of the world certainly ain't most people. I think that the government would do whatever they could to benefit from any such hypothetical technology while keeping us people completely in the dark about this relationship altogether. The main reason this is so fascinating to me is because it places a context of plausibility around everything I've gathered about the UFO or ET phenomenon over the course of many years, and frankly it is a bit frightening, although intriguing. Now again, I want to be clear that I'm not trying to propagate the belief in UFOs or little green men, but instead I'm making the personally disquieting admission, that Flat Earth establishes a far better foundation to support the idea of extraterrestrials than the globe Earth theory ever possibly could. Many in the conspiracy-minded community will admit that the idea of a hostile alien takeover of the world, or false flag or otherwise, is a possibility. Now, when we realize that the flat Earth phenomenon is a reality, then this notion becomes a frighteningly realistic possibility. So, while it may be common to instantly dismiss those who claim to have witnessed and documented UFOs, or even those who claim to have been taken aboard their craft and experimented upon, these people may not be as unreliable or as crazy as we might like to think. The big question becomes, if some UFOs are being piloted by humanoid creatures from some unknown portion of the physical plane, if they're actually visiting our realm, are they friend or foe? Now, abductee stories are pretty clear to me that ET encounters can be extremely frightening, painful, and intrusive to a profound level. Some claim that they've undergone hundreds of abductions over the course of their lives, where they are clearly shown the ETs are crossbreeding their DNA with humans, producing human-looking offspring which have the outward appearance and physiology of a human, but are in fact of extraterrestrial origins. Many have also made the connection between demonic possession, hauntings, and UFO or ET encounters, lending more to the notion that these ETs are no friend if they exist at all. Now, of course, there are others who will claim that the ETs are our friends and great teachers. These so-called ascended masters are here to guide humanity through our so-called evolution. Personally, I believe that if there are actually intelligent humanoids out there upon the plane somewhere, beyond the realm of Earth, if they're anything like humans, many of them will be kind and loving and generous, and many of them will be callous, greedy, jealous, and frankly evil. Perhaps such creatures coexist in the same society as we do. It stands to reason that if that is the case, then the evil, violent, and greedy ones would probably be the ones in power, while the good and benevolent ones would likely be subservient to the psychopathic ones, right? And this is, of course, because kind and loving and benevolent entities are not really interested in such things as power and control and domination over others, whereas the psychopathic sorts certainly are. And now, in any case, whether these hypothetical aliens are friend or foe, benevolent teachers or demonic entities or something in between, the concept is a fascinating one, which is made all the more plausible when we realize that our world is not a speck of mud zipping around the cosmos in 5 different directions at once. I'm personally really only interested in knowing the truth, and at this point all we can do is speculate and maybe pray on it. It's simply not possible for me to up and travel to Antarctica and plot a course south for potentially hundreds of miles beyond the South Pole. Now, such a thing should be totally doable this day and age in terms of our technology and physical, practical capacity to do such a journey. But unfortunately, we have the world governments perpetuating the globe Earth theory by designating the Antarctic a no man's land, which need not be explored. And really, there's no reason to even see or imagine what's beyond the Antarctic, because you'll just go around the bottom of the sphere and wind up right back where at the same latitude where you started. So instead of focusing our efforts and dreams and resources on the attainable frontier involved with exploring the massive and mysterious and awesome physical plane of reality, theoretical science has convinced the smartest people in the world during the most technologically advanced time known in history to look in the completely wrong direction up in the sky, where they're convinced little worlds are spinning around just like our little world is spinning around in space. If the United States spent the budget of NASA on exploring beyond the known realm and sharing that information with the public, we would have answers to all sorts of unknown values of the flat Earth, not least of which would involve whether or not we're alone on this plane. Now, that is an extremely important question to ask, and official entities like SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, are probably well-meaning, highly intelligent people who have been utterly and completely misled about our very place and significance in the universe, and are just totally looking in the wrong direction altogether. Now, at this point, based on everything that we know to be true, I submit that it's highly likely that there are certainly large amounts of natural resources just waiting to be tapped, and possibly even other civilizations well within our ability to reach with modern technology. Unfortunately, as long as the globe Earth remains a priority for the powers which ought not be, it's practically impossible for us to answer some of these questions, like, is there a physical dome, or does the world keep going beyond the eye shot of the sun? I find it highly unlikely that the world just ends and falls off into space at some point. These are the types of questions that we should be addressing as realistic, quantifiable topics that we could dream about, inspiring generations of new people to explore these new actual frontiers and find potential cousin civilizations right in our proverbial backyard. When you go back and read the Bible with flat earth eyes, as it were, one thing is clear. The sons of God were somehow impregnating the daughters of men, creating essentially hybrid beings known as the Nephilim. Many argue that the sons of God are referring to fallen angels, and that the Nephilim are referring to hybrids, giants, renowned men of old, as the Bible says. Now, it's argued that the great flood story told of in the story of Noah, and all ancient cultures, by the way, this great flood, according to the Bible, was to cleanse the earth of this hybrid bloodline brought about by the Nephilim. So if there is a demonic aspect to the extraterrestrial phenomenon, and they're supposedly impregnating women to give birth to what even these mothers believe are hybrid beings, which are often whisked away from the mother very early on in the pregnancy, then are we in fact living among Nephilim hybrids in this world today? One thing's for certain: if there are in fact extraterrestrial intelligent life forms and civilizations beyond our known realm, they too were created by God, no doubt. This fact is reassuring to me, as I know one thing very clearly, and that is that God is good. Whatever comes of this question, whether we find that we are indeed imprisoned in a snow globe, or contrarily, if our known realm is merely one of many in the general vicinity alone, the truth is something we all deserve to know, one way or another. This is what I feel is one of the most important reasons to spread the word about flat Earth, in spite of the obvious social and other repercussions. In fact, we've got a ton of exploring to do. Politicians want to talk about creating jobs and doing something about the energy crises, dealing with overpopulation by decreasing numbers down to like 90% as suggested by or decreasing our numbers down some 90% as suggested by the Georgia Guidestones and assorted elitist think tanks. Millions of children on planet Earth dream of being astronauts because people are pioneering and explorative by nature. And out of thousands of applicants to NASA, of course, a handful of lying Freemasons are selected for the job, and subsequently they pretend to be in space for months at a time. Now, on flat Earth, our children should be and could be dreaming of exploring new lands, but not hypothetically in outer space, but actually being the first people to explore new continents here in reality. Instead of being stuck in a small section of reality, which is certainly being ruled by demonic forces, we should have the ability to venture out of this land and set our own destiny. Perhaps such a thing is not even possible. Perhaps we do live in a snow globe, but we do have a right to know the truth one way or the other. Now, while I don't personally think there's a glass dome in the sky which is based somewhere on the ground, it is entirely possible that the lower density gases comprising the highest portions of the atmosphere plane could be contained, or better still, orchestrated by the Earth's natural rotating magnetic field vortex. I can imagine crystalline structures comprised of supercooled helium, for example, which can actually crystallize in a mere second at very low temperatures. I can imagine such large quantities of supercooled helium crystallizing, and what would happen if a large chunk of a massive helium crystal that formed high in the sky came crashing down to Earth. I submit that it would look exactly like a meteor or meteor shower. In other words, the reality of the flat Earth is not contingent upon a physical glass dome in the sky, and certainly not contingent upon one which meets with the ground at some point. To me, the most important question is, what is beyond the known realm? I think it would be a crime if such a question were not revealed to us, especially now that we've called bull balls on the whole ball Earth thing. The question is, really, are we ready for the answer? What if there is not a physical dome base to be found at the circumference of the world somewhere? Would it mean God doesn't exist, or does that mean the Earth isn't flat? Of course not to both of those questions, but there are a great many flat earthers and Christians who have incorporated their belief in flat Earth and in God somehow in this glass dome in the sky together with the reality of flat Earth, which to me is not prudent. In other words, the Earth can be and is flat and stationary with or without a physical dome in the sky. God created everything in the world and extended universe with or without a physical glass dome in the sky. To me, it seems that God, the creator of all things, is simply not limited to creating exclusively planet Earth and nothing else. It seems extremely presumptuous and naive at once to limit God's creative ability to one single realm. Now, I stand to be corrected, but the existence of a dome in the sky, or the lack thereof, in no way affects my estimation of the fixed and immovable Earth, nor does it affect my faith in God, the divine, supernatural, creative force and intelligence behind, well, everything. At the same time, it's profoundly important that we answer these questions within our lifetimes. I feel like the flat Earth truth efforts are a success when the government disbands NASA and we begin spending real resources on Earth's exploration instead of hypothetical space exploration, which will get us nowhere but further deceived and exploited. Now, I believe it's a basic human right to be fruitful and multiply. And this simple truth that God has revealed to us as flat earthers is, I believe, the only possible way in which our descendants have a chance to live fulfilling, meaningful lives, free of the godless and deceptive system that has been set up in our name for the sole purpose of deceiving our children into a life of servitude and captivity on the hypothetical prison planet Earth. So with that, I'm going to wrap this one up, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope I didn't create too many enemies here, although, again, I don't think I'm endorsing anything too out of the way, except for we need to explore the world and learn the truth to its greatest extent possible. Listen, guys, if you'd like to support the channel, we are and always have been viewer supported. So you can become a patron on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Go to www.patreon.com/themorgile. Or you can go to PayPal for a one-time contribution to www.paypal.me/themorgile. Thanks so much, guys, for your support. God bless you all. Much love. Spread the word, spread the world, and peace out, everybody.
Feel my style. Feel my style. Feel my style. Feel my style.